Welcome to the AADA workshop program and this session titled Maximising Wholesale Efficiency and Margin, presented by Andrew Tyson, General Manager at CarZap. Ladies and gentlemen, please welcome Andrew Tyson.
Good afternoon, everybody. I'm sure I didn't get to it, but I'm sure if you did enjoy the car sales luncheon, Dylan Alcott would have been amazing. Apparently this morning's breakfast, similar sort of concept. So what I'm going to cover this afternoon, just as an introduction, both for the people streaming and the people in the room. So I think these are the last sessions for the conference. So I'm mindful of everybody punching out a couple of days. So I've tried to tailor my content. I don't intend to use the full 45 minutes for you, for example, so there is plenty of time for questions. I'd love for you to interact, for example, but what I'd really like to talk you through and help you understand is how can I maximise efficiency and margin within my wholesale business as a dealership. So I'm going to start with a bit of a video to give you a bit of a flavour.
Disruption. Now, 1. The forcible separation or division into parts. 2. A buzzword businesses throw around so often that it loses meaning. Disruption is actionable. It's a priority. It's the need to become the next big thing, not just staying relevant. Today, the pace of change is accelerating and unrelenting. Those that aren't innovating are getting left behind. When was the last time you rented a DVD? A VHS? When was the last time you paid a movie return late fee? Now that you can stream any movie you want to from the comfort of your couch, do you wonder how you managed before? Spoken to your travel agent recently? Even thought about calling someone to book your hotel or flights for you? Would you even know where to find one? We didn't think so. Would you rather get out a phone book, look up a taxi company's phone number, call them, and then wait and wait and wait for the cab to get to your house? Or would you rather get a ride in minutes using an app on your phone? Exactly. In a world that's always changing, the companies that disrupt thrive.
Now, I like that quick video. It gives you a bit of a flavour of how I'd like to talk to you and think about some of the concepts I'd like you to think about today. I'm not suggesting for a second that there's a disruption needed like Netflix or Uber in the wholesale industry, but there's absolutely an opportunity for the industry as a whole and driven by the operators in the industry, and particularly franchise dealers, to have a look at disruption within yourself. I think that's the key thing I'd like you to think about today with some of the stuff I'd like you to introduce concepts of. And it is very much about some things around change management in terms of disruption, in that the way we do wholesale now absolutely needs to be looked at, potentially broken down into pieces and processes to understand how you can get a little bit more margin and certainly an efficiency around that process as well. In terms of content, I'll tell you a little bit about me for those that don't know me. And what I'll also talk about, again, is what is wholesale. I'm not going to cover that too much. I'm sure you guys and ladies all understand what wholesale is in your business, but a little bit about how it's done now, traditionally across the industry. The main things I'd really like to cover are the next couple, which is digital benefits and capturing data in wholesale. So if you think about all these concepts, I'm sure you're doing a lot of digital in your marketing, for example, you're capturing data across the business, CRM tools, customer information, that sort of thing. I'll talk about those concepts within wholesale for your business and how that can improve some of your efficiencies and overall margin. Buying audience. So again, this is traditionally a marketing concept that is absolutely transferable within wholesale, within your business. And that is relevant to digital tools at the same time. Transparency. I'm massive on transparency. I think if you think of it in a retail concept in a lot of ways, being transparent to your customer and developing that level of transparency repeats a lot of business. It develops, especially in a digital world, a trust level with you when they're looking from the outside in and once you're interacting with them as a whole through the transaction process. So again, I think very relative in retail and absolutely relative in wholesale when I talk to you about a couple of things this afternoon. I'll then kick it off to just towards what are the efficiencies I can achieve through some digital technologies within the wholesale process of my business. And the big one, which again, that video around disruption as an example, talks about breaking down a process and how I fix that. Change management, generally the biggest barrier and wall you're going to come across to implementing a change in your process within your business. If you frame it around the idea of, I'd like to disrupt what I'm doing in my wholesale, you need to have a plan and a change management process around how you're going to affect that change. It's super important. Who am I? I won't do too much of this. I've essentially, when I finished university, I've spent my entire working career within the automotive industry across a couple of different things. I kicked off at Fowles Auction Group, so I won't cover the first 3 or 4 years, but my main key sort of big role, once I learned a bunch of things at an auction company called Fowles Auction Group, was I was the National Fleet Manager at Toyota Financial Services, which is now TFM. Over the course of 3 years, I sat in a role at Milson's Point in Sydney, selling about 6,500 cars a year, post mobile phone days, so mobiles had really been in effect for about 4 or 5 years, and in a lot of ways, we use facsimile and phone to punch out 6,500 cars a year to Toyota dealer networks around the country, and no digital, no ways to make efficiencies and gain margin other than relationships and communication over a phone. And I learned a heap around how do we improve that and what do we do. The end result of that and that role was the TFM process was outsourced. We used a company called AADA Group at the time. If some of you remember AADA Group in Jups in Melbourne and at Enfield in Sydney. I learned a lot about change management and that sort of process, but it really gave me an insight into high volume transactions and wholesale and how to really generate some margins. I mean, big numbers, small margins make big gains in a lot of ways. I ended up back at Mannheim for nearly 8 or 9 years in total, effectively doing dealer-to-dealer transactions, OEM work, but that period was when simulcast came online, so everybody could buy via the internet and auctions online. And again, the process, the delivery, the digital, the tech was there, but getting a process in place to have dealers, I'll talk about it as dealers here, of course, because it's across everything now. It's retail, it's consumers as well. But the change from buying online and the trust level of the quality of a product and a condition report, it literally took years to have a national network of consistency around buying a car online, which everybody does every day now, all the time. So again, I was involved in that in a lot of ways at a company like Mannheim, and it really taught me a lot about how do you implement that process, how do you change, and how do you affect a really good change to your business. I then spent some time with NRMA under the brand of Thrifty as their national fleet manager. Again, circa 4,500 cars a year we transacted on, direct to dealers. We didn't use consumers, and zero technology. So we had a bit of logistics in that we held locations everywhere, but in that process with no digital, all I did was go from very simple processes of car-to-car single transactions into at least grouped environment transaction sales. So we predominantly did tenders, and we also did some outsourced to auction companies, so that allowed us to keep driving at least high volume, overall fast transactions, and trying to creep margin all the way through when you're talking about high volume. But again, not lots of digital around that. So, and it's just under 10 years ago, and a company selling 4,500 cars a year wasn't using any technology to communicate with hundreds and hundreds of buyers nationally, right? So that process for them, again, has changed over time. And I've been at Pickles for the last 8 years, into my current role at Carsat, which you feel, mate, it's absolutely, it's sort of my wheelhouse in a lot of ways. I get to put together what I've learnt over the 15, 20 years in the industry, and I'm really now starting to at least try and affect a change within the industry that adds a real big chunk of value around what is in some ways one of the last bastions of process within retail dealerships, where there's not been a lot of change affected over the last 15, 20 years. What is wholesale? This is a super simple one. I won't cover heaps and heaps of this, right? So when I talk about wholesale, it's your trade-in stock that you don't retain for retail sale. So that's either a purchased vehicle, so someone comes in your door, you're buying it, however you're buying it online. If you're not keeping it for retail, I see it as a wholesale stock item. It includes aged inventory in a lot of ways, and again, the last 10 years, everybody's been really diligent about how long do I keep a retail stock item for? You know, I still at this point in time don't understand why anybody wholesales a retail inventory aged car. It's just a case of better management through the course of its retail life. You know, the car sales guys, all these guys will tell you how to do that better, of course. That's not my wheelhouse. but I certainly don't understand why you ever have a retail car that you've spent money on, you've sat on your forecourt and whatever else forecourt, that's a very English term, but at the end of the day, you're not helping yourself at all by wholesaling an aged inventory. At the moment, the market is the most buoyant I've ever seen it in 20 years. We all understand why that is, but it's a very rare time where you potentially will wholesale an aged inventory item and make money in terms of just the cold asset cost versus what you sell it for. In terms of the process, most dealerships are doing car-to-car transactions I talk about it as a limited buyer marketplace. It's very relationship driven in a lot of ways. And you know, so there's lots of dealerships doing it really well in terms of putting more buyers together, having their stock more visible to those buyers and trying to broaden that process. But again, there's limited competitive transaction processes within both franchise and independent dealerships when you're talking about wholesale. And when I talk about it too, of course, it's about doing it yourself. So I'm not referring to if you outsourced it to a larger wholesale group, whether it be your Mannheims, your Pickles, your Greys, your auction houses. That absolutely gives you a broader buyer base. It gives you a competitive transaction process, which ultimately drives you better margin. There's a lot of efficiencies around it in some ways too. Like if you don't have the land holding to sit on 30 cars, 5 cars, whatever it is, getting them off your site and having them outsourced is a pretty good efficiency. But again, the focus I think is there's a cost to that and you net it out at some point, but the technologies are available now to you to self-serve that process and understand whether that efficiency and that margin gain and revenue, which I'll talk about differently and when I say revenue versus margin, within your business. So that's the possibility that it hasn't really changed in 20 years. Everybody's still doing very similar things and there's not lots of how do I find more buyers, how do I connect with those people? And those technologies are absolutely available to you at the minute. Competitive process is super important, right? And the relationship piece is, again, when I talk about disruption, that's the big disruption that digital technologies at the moment within wholesale are up against on a regular basis. Everybody's used to having a trust level and a relationship with X amount of people, right? And the disruption is, I've dealt with these people for a certain amount of time, whether that time period's long, how the relationship builds for you, it's very tightly managed around how then the transaction piece happens. And the very cold, hard reality of that process and how it's been done for many years and how it hasn't changed is that you're limiting your audience of buyer and you're limiting your ability to then change and drive a better margin often. You know, very small things like tying the trade transaction valuation to the transaction itself. You know, if I'm a wholesaler and I'm pricing your cars and I'm pricing them to buy them off you and there's no competition, the reality of that transaction piece is I'm potentially missing, I call margin in that sense, in terms of the transaction. Make that decision yourself. And again, I'll cover some of these things as I walk you through what I think are the efficiencies and changes we should all be looking at. And that's one of them. The relationship is limiting. I think it's super important at the same time. Having a relationship with guys that support your business and girls, super important. But at the end of the day, depending on how you manage it, it's limiting your audience. So again, an outsource of that process, which some people do, it's not done lots and lots, allows you to break down that relationship piece in some form and allow you a little bit more transparency, competitive sort of activity. While I'm talking, so I'm more than happy to have questions, interactions. I will ask you some questions as we go along. Love to have a little bit of interaction from you, but I'm coming now to essentially digital benefits, capturing data and how that's going to help you with your wholesale margin and your efficiencies through your business. I'm going to start at the innovation piece, right? Again, disruption, what are we doing in our business now? Innovation is a big part of that. We all understand what that is, but how do we implement it in our business is almost the first thing you start thinking about in terms of what changes am I going to make within my business to try and drive an improvement here. And when I talk about that, the first thing I think of is starting with that first touch point of your customer for the wholesale transaction, which is a trade-in or a purchase opportunity. The customer walks in your door, as an example, and you try and buy the car off them. They maybe don't want to buy a used car or a new car. They just want to sell you the car, right? And capturing accurate vehicle info of that inventory is the first step in that. Okay, there's products all over the place for that. You know, Eval Expert, Auto Check, iAppraise, you know, the dealer drives of the world, they do an appraisal tool, they also do loan car activities. But the key, one of the big key drivers is what is that car that sits in front of me, and therefore what's its value set to my business. You know, that's a pretty common one, and I'm sure we'd all agree that's not news to us. But again, the process, the innovation, like how many people in this room at the moment are using a digital appraisal tool at the moment in your business? You know, a handful. So it's still less than 50% of the room, right? So capturing the right information all the time. And the key point is same, if you're not using a digital appraisal at the moment, generally speaking, most people are only recording the appraisal they did when it's a deal. So again, they're not capturing all that info, all that data set for one, of what the cars are they're trying to do business on and missing out on. And a digital product will absolutely manage that process, and you won't miss any single one of them. So think about that as the first sort of efficiency, where if you move to a digital tool and you've got to implement that. So again, when I talk about change process and innovation and how do I disrupt my business, how you implement that has to be process driven from the sales guy doing it, rather than the wholesale manager being the only person in the business that has any interaction and understanding of what's that asset worth to my business. And when I said before around margin and revenue, there's a differentiator, right? The margin's what you end up getting on the sale of that trade-in, but it's also a potential revenue stream for you. So every trade-in appraisal you do that you miss because you didn't get the right info, or you didn't record the one that you did miss and circle back to that person, that's a revenue opportunity, right? So the margin becomes second. That's the way I sort of look at it. The quality of the decision, right? So if you've got all the good data and all the information you need, then the people that are making the decision and sharing the decision process are going to be able to make much better decisions on that from the first step of the process. I mean, that's the really important. Again, your digital benefit is I'm recording it. I know that the wholesale guy, girl put 30 grand on that car. You know, we lost it because all these appraisal tools, that's what they'll do, right? They'll go, that's your 50 ones you did this month, and there's the 25 you bought. And the 25 you didn't buy, where's the decision process in sending that to someone to chase it up and understand if I can get those 25 cars to become a revenue opportunity for my business? And again, margin comes secondary, but you've missed all those opportunities as a revenue stream for your business. Okay, again, you capture the right data, you make the right decision, that's the opportunity you've got there. The improved communication still sits with that again. How do I get that to the guy who's got to make the decision? Pre-mobile phones, I wasn't around then, to be fair, but how did we do an appraisal and communicate it to the right person to make a decision at the same time frame that I've got a customer sitting in my room trying to make a buying and selling decision with my business? You know, that's changed significantly with a mobile phone. Everybody, that's the one given that everyone went, mobile phones are awesome for that process. Because I can walk around wherever I like, be wherever I like, and the guy can ring me and I can price that car. Right? That's one improvement at the moment. Bunch of different tools, CRMs, appraisal tools, going to the right person to make the right decision, the decision-making process to somebody else. You know, the reality is if it's a used deal or a new car deal, the new car guy wants to do it. Okay? Give him the right information to make that deal happen in his environment and share that info and make it happen as quickly as possible. And same in a used car transaction. You know, the F&I guy, all the people within that transaction piece, if they've got the right info and it's shared quickly, we can all make heaps better decisions at the moment. You know, and that show of hands of how many people are using a tool like that, that's the gain, that's the improvement all our businesses should be looking at and move towards it. And again, that's the increased revenue piece that comes with it. How do I get more cars? At the moment, super relevant, right? How do I buy more cars in my business as a used car option? Because my new car options are limited in terms of volume and driving more revenue, and those margins are awesome at the moment. So how do I trade more cars? You know, margin is, again, that's the secondary piece, because you either wholesale it or you retail it, and they're different margin points. And I stick it in retail when I say, as a business person, as a dealer, when I put it in retail, right, and these are the benefits, is I'm going to put that car in front of as many people within my visibility line of sight, my customer set, my marketing tools to sell that and drive as much margin as I can. Yeah, when we don't keep it for retail, we're parking it down the back and we're showing 2 people. I mean, that's the sort of concept I'm trying to get everyone to go, that's what we've got to start focusing on. That's a big chunk of our business, and it's no longer the part that's not going to be helped by the same things you've seen in 10, 15 years around your retail business. That's the trade more stock for retail and wholesale, which again is revenue and margin opportunity within our business. Providing a larger audience of buyers piece, right, and then capturing and using the info you've already had from an appraisal or a sale platform, okay, that's available now too. You know, I mean, I watched the session this morning with the Auto Trader guys, and the marketing manager of Alto Group, when he was asked, what are the key things you're going to see in the next 4 or 5 years that is important for digital marketing, he commented on 2 things. The first one was parts and aftermarket. So obviously he feels like that's an area of the business we can all get better at, and there's margin opportunity there. And he actually said wholesale out loud in front of the whole room, which I don't think I've heard that in the last 5 years, because everyone still sort of looks at wholesale as it's the guy down the back and it's the wholesale car. There's not that focus. But if you capture the right data, you make more decisions, you can buy more cars, there's platforms out there that can make you have a huge amount of more buyers looking at that asset to give you a better opportunity, right? Yep, it'll break down some relationships, right? But there's ways to manage that and have that in your change process and how you implement. But anyone in the room that doesn't think about 3 buyers is enough buyers, I don't know how anyone could think that you can ever have enough buyers in a lot of ways. So why is wholesale any different in your business? You know, there's a limitation in a relationship and a small audience, and that's a massive gain, and it's all available right now to anybody in this room watching what we're doing. Data integration, I think, is, again, there's now, I mean, you think about the data integration, a couple of examples being, you know, aggregation for retail into advertising sites now, data integration in and out of appraisal tools and sale platforms to update your forms and all the information in your DMS, CRM tools in the same way. You know, I love to think of a world where your appraisal tool is talking to your CRM tool and punching out the leads to follow up same day on an appraisal that didn't get traded on that day. Because you're touching your customer at the same time on the same transaction with a revenue opportunity. You know what I mean? I think of it that way, where I'm trying to trade that car in the morning, and whatever deal, whether I've achieved a retail transaction with a trade involved, and someone then touches that same customer that afternoon to confirm, because the CRM's told them we did this appraisal and there's no deal somewhere in our system, communicate with that person, hey, just touching base, you know, how'd you go with your trade-in? Because that's the revenue opportunity that the system's telling you. That's a data integration piece that's achievable now in a lot of ways. And into the future is virtually infinite numbers in some ways of how do I use and play with the data I've got now to better automate my process, you know, broaden my audience of buyers and the people I'm communicating with, you know, because you broaden it, you're going to find more relationships. Like, that's another one I always think about, right? I've got 3 relationships now, cool. If I'm in front of 50 people, that gives me an opportunity to develop 47 more relationships. So if you innovation or the disruption in your business that you take away after this week and listen to me prattle on for half an hour is, how do I improve those 3 relationships into 5 or 10? There's effort, but you've got to have a process to try and get there, because there'll be revenue opportunities in that'll help you out. I won't talk too much about the probity and stuff. I'll cover that a little bit in how I talk about transparency, but in your business, as an owner, as a manager, how much in my wholesale department and how it works, buying, selling, trading, do I know? And how much of it is visible to me? You know, we're past the days of lots of, like, the way that people used to operate. Like, I don't think there's lots of fraudulent and carry on in the wholesale industry, but at the same time, if I'm a business owner, and certainly what I do in my roles and in what I do in a work life, I think we're all better off understanding what's happening and seeing the metrics and understanding that transparency and the probity, if you want that for a better term, about what's happening in all areas of my business. Right? It's not at all indicating that that's an issue in the industry, but it's an opportunity again where if we use the right tools, capture the right information, we can make much better decisions around what we're doing in that area. You know, I think one super quick example is what you hear from me today, take it back to your business next week and go and ask a couple of questions about what can I see and what can I then improve. That's your first step, right? That's your innovation of what am I going to do to try and implement some of these changes that might be helpful for me. Any questions? Happy to hear them if you want them. Buying audience, again, so this is relative. When I talk about buying audience, it's absolutely, when I talk about it, what's relative to digital, wholesale, efficiency and margin, right? What is your audience now? I mean, I would think most of us in the room understand our retail marketing audience. What's your audience in wholesale? You know, and I ask that simple one because I feel like it doesn't exist as an audience. It exists as a handful of relationships where I'm rarely communicating much more than phone calls and verbal information about an asset I'm trying to buy and sell. So the buying audience is something that you could generate a huge increase in the efficiency and the margins of your wholesale department because there's tools that help you walk your way through improving that audience size. And again, from analog to digital, it could just be go back to your business and understand who are we talking to about our cars? How many people are there? And how do I find 5 more? Do you know what I mean? What's our process of doing that? I'm not saying that everything you have to do when you walk away from AADA 2022 is go and get a bunch of digital tools and start going your hardest, but ask the question within your business is there a process that I can implement that achieves a similar gain? And then look at what's the next step, and that potentially is your digital process, right? How do you manage your audience? Again, this is a relationship piece. Often, I mean, 25 years ago, guys were employed to value and wholesale and do that within a business because they knew 10 buyers. They had a relationship with those guys. That was his IP. You know, this day and age, that should be the IP of the business, right? Again, you think of a CRM tool. If you've got it all, it doesn't matter what happens with the person doing that role. It then becomes that same element of coaching and managing that person to get a result out of the tools you offer them. And if your only tool is hope that that person, guy, girl, knows enough people to get me the best margin and result that I can get, then that's a gain you can make, is be better at doing that. You can do that digitally. You can do it analog too. You can do it without having a digital tool to manage that. But that's the process that I think everyone should walk away and look at a little bit closer and understand what can I do there. It should be your IP, for want of a better term, is who those relationships are, who those people are, and how do I communicate with them. You know, how do I engage them? How do I do that? How do I know that my wholesale valuer buyer is communicating with all 5 of the people that we deal with every time on every asset? You know, stock visibility. Does every one of those 5 people see every one of my 10 cars available for sale that month, or 20 or 30? And as you start ramping up the number, it's still a question as to how often do I see that every car. You don't list half your cars on Car Sales, Auto Trader or Gumtree, do you? You want to put your entire inventory in front of a retail customer and give them every opportunity to transact with you. But in wholesale, traditionally and often, we're just presenting the cars that we've got the time to present to the buyer set that we have. And super simple tools, like I know guys that communicate via WhatsApp to a group of people some photos of a car. Like, that's a really simple change and a process within your business that's going to allow you to present those cars to those 5 people, right? And that's what I sort of talk about. Even if that's your first step that you're not doing now, that's going to start giving you a flavour of how do I change my process and how do I keep driving a bit of a change in that. You know, the comparison, right? When I'm sitting at TFM in 2001 and literally some days 50 handwritten inspection reports would come in on the fax from Toyota dealers around the country. I had no way to communicate those 50 inspection reports with no pictures and handwriting that you probably couldn't read half the time anyway. To, I think back then, you know, would Toyota have 240, 200 plus? How many franchisees around the country? You know, I couldn't get that info to them fast enough. 10 minutes to go, righto. How are you presenting them? Same concept. Do I get it in front of them, present them well enough? I don't expect you, I wouldn't retail ready a wholesale car, right? There's not that big a benefit, but if you're not showing them at least and giving them an understanding of what you're offering them, same. And do they have the time to do it? Sometimes people just want to turn that wholesale car over every 2 days so the 2 other blokes didn't get to look at it, or girls. That's an interesting one. Like, sit on it for 3 days so everyone can look at it. Super simple. You would in retail, why not in wholesale? Transparency sells better than perfection. So the transparency piece I'm massive on. Todd Capone, spend half an hour, YouTube him. He's this guy who's just mad for human behavioural science and transparency, right? And it's absolutely a retail type concept, but when you transfer the same things that we talk about for transparency into your wholesale, you would be amazed at the level of change in your margin that you would achieve. It's about telling the buyer exactly what that car is. Don't hide, no ducks and drakes. That's what it is. Because as a buyer of a car off you in my relationship, I trust that. And I'm going to be genuine and upfront about the delivery of that transaction with you. You know, that's the transparency piece. I think that we can all have an amazing gain on within wholesale. You know, often, and I say often, I hear from people who are buyers of cars that go to franchise dealerships and their communication is, g'day, I'm this guy, I want to buy off you, cool, yes, no. They try once or twice and they just give up because they don't get an introduction to buy a car off you. And often it's a relationship, I've got 5 guys, you know, they're really good to me, and if I start bringing in 3 or 4 others, those 5 guys are going to get a little bit dirty about the process, right? Be transparent with the 5 guys. Hey guys, I'd really like to have a bigger audience of buyers for my business and have more relationships. I'd like the relationships I've got with you 5 with 5 more people. That's how you manage it. That's being transparent. I would bet money. I'm not a big better, right? And $5, call it, like, not a big bet. 4 out of the 5 are going to go, cool, I get it. I've had a really good relationship with you and you want to have more relationship, I'm okay with that. You might get one and goes, oh, that's not fair. I think that's a bit harsh for me to compete more often for your car. But the 4 will keep, and they'll be much better off with your relationship because you told them about it and then you went off and developed more relationships. That's one example of how the transparency piece, I think, makes a big difference. The gap almost of the competitive process itself. Like, competition is not a dirty word. Be transparent about it. And again, digital platforms allow you to do that infinitely faster and better. But even if you're doing it in your normal world, no tech to do it, make every car available and tell everyone, I'm going to make every car available. Today is no longer the day where you came in on Monday morning and the 3 I had available I sold to you before I even showed them to the 4 other guys that I deal with. Now, every Monday, I'm going to wait till my 4 other guys, and that's the transparency part, to be honest with them, and most of them will appreciate that. And certainly when you're out building a new relationship, they're going to love the fact that they're coming into an environment that has other people that are going to be competitive with because you told them that's how it worked. And it helps you also weed out the ones that potentially you don't want to be doing business with in a lot of ways. Couple of stats. So this is when I talk then, think about it as these are some high level efficiency pieces that I think are important, right? And agnostically, these are coming back to what I do on a regular basis, which is a sale platform, right? And an appraisal, right? Sale platform, transparent marketplace. I know, I deal with them all the time. I've been doing it long enough. Buyers love that we all get access to all the cars. You know, in a Nirvana world, every franchise dealer in Australia puts their cars into open marketplace platforms and every car is available to everybody. And you'll get more buyers and everybody loves that. They know that we're all in it, we're all having a crack at it, and that's a buyer value set, right? Because it's transparent. You're going to access more people. So you know what that's going to mean. If I'm a seller or I'm a buyer and I've found another 40 people, the first thing I'm doing is ringing those other 40 and asking if they can sell me a car. You know, that's a huge value set. Again, in terms of revenue drive and therefore the margin possibility, you're going to find more people to buy off if you broaden your selling audience. Appraisal tools, again, the people that do it, they'll understand what I'm talking about. Average appraisal conversion. So I've got at the bottom here, the selling data is related to Cars App, but the appraisal data I'm not identifying, but it's from a couple of different sources in the marketplace. one of them's here at the moment, I'd encourage you to go and talk to them, right? But average conversion rates are 31% of trade appraisals done. So I don't know individually your businesses, but are you trading, are you appraising 100 cars a month and buying 31% of them on average? You know, and I think one of the other ones, some of their best customers, the one I've listed there was 56%. One of the other companies I spoke to is somewhere around 61%. So again, if that's not what you're doing in your business, what's the analog version of taking away from what we talk about today to your business and converting the same thing? Go and get every handwritten appraisal you've got every month. Stop just entering the ones you did and record them all for a month and see what your conversion rate is and understand what is my margin possibility and my revenue possibility out of that. You know, 110,000 done and only half the room is potentially doing it. Like there's a lot of appraisals being done out there. Sale platforms, average 9.3 platform-wide per car sold. Are you getting 9.3 offers on average on every single wholesale car you have? You know, that's again, the transparency piece, the broadening your buyer base, it's gonna drive a change in your margin. And obviously if you're buying them up front often, that's your revenue opportunity too, because you know you're gonna have plenty of opportunities to resell that in wholesale alone, not to mention doing more appraisals and buying a retail car. You know, they've all these sale platforms, us aside, there's 1,000 odd users out there all the time just trying to find more cars to buy. And you can tap into that tomorrow, go and register on any given platform and you can start interacting with those people. Particularly 400 plus monthly, active. We differentiate active, not just login, but perform an action. Just the login part's higher, but again, a looker is not necessarily as interested to you. You want the people that are engaging you if you go to that digital platform. And I talked about the biggest and lowest conversion rates. Super lucky last in terms of a case study around sale platform, one of our customers. Process was, let's change. We sat down, we did a process with them to deliver that. You know, they tendered 52 odd cars in a month. I think it was 2 months in terms of the total process. They averaged 43 people participating. 69% of cars met their expectations straight off the bat. 11.3 offers per car, again, and an average of $1,000 over their reserve price. And that's not a silly number to look at and go, what am I going to take away today and how do I go back to my business and understand where can I have an improvement? Go and find 5 more people. Make them price every single car and then see if it affects your margin. Make sense? And 10 new buyers. So not just people looking then at that level, these people ended up transacting with you. And they're the 10 I'm ringing, going, can you sell me a car? Like if you're not going to put it on a platform that I'm on, can you sell me one analog way? And who do you deal with and how many people am I going to compete with when I do that? Because they'll go, cool, he wants to know what I'm into and how I do it. That generates a pretty good relationship. I talked for at least 10 minutes longer than I thought I would, so I do appreciate your time, everybody. Any questions at all? Happy to have them. What standard are we? 33.48. So if you do want to come and have a chat, you can come and at least connect with us and understand how you can find us later on. I hope you've enjoyed AADA. I've certainly enjoyed it. I'm a personable person. I've loved getting out and seeing everyone face to face. I'm sure you've all done the same. I appreciate your time on a Friday afternoon after 2 days. Thank you very much.